and thank you for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Stay with us. PM Abiy holds discussion with U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Katherine Tai. On the sideline of U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, Prime Minister Abiy had a good meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Katherine Tai to discuss ways of expanding U.S.-Ethiopia trade relations, Abiy tweeted. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is attending the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C., where he held discussion, among others, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina Ivanova-Georgi. In a new development, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has had discussions with members of the Ethiopian community living in Washington, D.C. The Premier, who is participating in the U.S.-Africa Summit in Washington, D.C., discussed current national issues with Ethiopians and Ethiopian descent. According to our staff reporter, Asmamaw Ayeno, the Prime Minister expressed the government's effort to carry out political, economic and legal reforms in the last 4 years to solve problems which the country is facing. It was noted that the Prime Minister urged the diaspora to continue its efforts to help the country. African leaders have met this week in the United States of America for the annual U.S.-Africa Summit. The three-day summit has featured announcements of new U.S. and Africa relationships in all spheres. The Ethiopian delegation, led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, is in attendance of the high-level summit. Daniel Kasahun has more.
The United States invited most leaders of the African continent from the African Union members to reinvigorate ties to the nations in all spheres. One key topic is the fate of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, the 2000 deal that granted duty-free access to the United States market for most products from sub-Saharan nations that meet standards on rights and democracy. President Joe Biden indicated this is the first of its kind summit between the two sides.
African ideas and innovation helping to shape the solutions, and African population contributing to every step. So the only question when I took office was not if we'd host another U.S.-African Leadership Summit, but when. My administration's engagement with Africa and the priority we place on these relationships began on day one. We've been working steadily with regional diplomacy and investments to demonstrate our commitment.
Thursday is dedicated to high-level discussions among leaders, with President Joe Biden opening the day with a session on partnering on Agenda 2063, the African Union's strategic vision for the continent. Earlier, President Biden highlighted the summit has featured announcements of new United States and Africa relationships in all spheres.
And the United States is committed to supporting every aspect of Africa's inclusive growth. All of you, the deals you've signed, the investments we've made together are concrete proof of the enduring commitment we're making to one another, government to government, business to business, people to people.
The session would have immense contribution for Ethiopia to enhance its economic ties with the United States.
The International Monetary Fund has been providing lots of financial support to Ethiopia for long, and this is really commendable. But in recent times, there were some challenges, and we are now urging for the continuation of their support following the peace deal. The Premier had candid discussion with respective officials. Green light is shown from their discussion. We have made thorough discussion with the World Bank officials on their financial support to Ethiopia. Now Ethiopia is after a prolonged war and the bank's support is highly needed. We have talked over it. Our Prime Minister has briefed all the officials about his reform programs and the interaction he wants with the international organization.
The three-day session concluded with a discussion on food security and food systems resilience, a critical issue for African partners who have been disproportionately impacted by the rise in food and fertilizer prices.
Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia announces Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's working visit to the U.S. will strengthen diplomatic relations between Ethiopia and international organizations. The spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Meles Alem, delivered a weekly statement regarding Ethiopia's current diplomatic activities. Jerusalem Betzaha has more.
The U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit from December 13 up to 15, 2022 in Washington, D.C. has created a platform to strengthen Ethiopia's diplomatic relations with the U.S. and other international organizations. In the weekly briefing, spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Meles Alem, indicated that Ethiopia's Prime Minister participation in the 2022 U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit has significantly demonstrated Ethiopia's effective diplomatic activity.
ክቡር የፌዴሪ ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትር ዶክተር አብይ አህመድ በአሜሪካ ቆይታቸው
In his stay in the United States, Prime Minister Abiy has held productive discussion with various United States officials to strengthen bilateral ties with the United States and international organizations. On this move, the Premier has constructive discussions with United States Secretary of State Blinken and United States National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan over a host of issues, including the implementation of the cessation of hostilities and the political and economic reform initiatives of the government and the way forward on revitalizing the historical bilateral relationship.
The spokesperson reiterated the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit has created an opportunity to further enhance the long-standing diplomatic friendship between Ethiopia and the United States. According to Alem, the Premier also affirmed Ethiopia's stance on different sideline discussions with U.S. officials. The statement also stressed on the Premier's discussion with the Managing Director of IMF and other representatives of international organizations, which is said to help Ethiopia's transformative economic reform agenda.
In the sidelines of the United States-Africa Leaders Summit, Prime Minister Abiy has discussed with international organizations on Ethiopia's need for debt resolutions to help Ethiopia's rehabilitation works. In this regard, the World Bank has recently approved $745 million grant in development support for peace and reconstruction after the conflict in the northern part of the country. This is a great achievement. Therefore, we can say the Premier's working visit is fruitful.
Furthermore, spokesperson Meles recalled that Ethiopia received a major award in recognition of its success in Green Legacy Initiative to address the adverse impacts of climate change, stating that the Green Legacy Initiative is becoming a joint project of all Africans.
Welcome back. The Joint Ministerial Committee for War-Affected Areas of Ethiopia announced that the humanitarian support and rehabilitation activities being carried out in Tigray, Amhara and Afar regions is progressing well. The committee said efforts are underway to solve the problems facing it to achieve the desired results. However, fuel supply remains a major challenge, said the committee. Goshu Melliso has the latest.
The Joint Ministerial Committee is mandated to monitor the humanitarian support and resume basic services in conflict-affected areas of northern Ethiopia, evaluating the performance of preliminary and implementation phase of restoration process. The Joint Ministerial Committee announced the rehabilitation activities and humanitarian supports which are being carried out in Tigray, Amhara and Afar regions are progressing well. In its report, the committee said more than 6.9 million people in Amhara, Afar and Tigray regions need emergency food and non-food assistance. The committee revealed that over 85,000 metric tons of food was delivered by partners, and the government has provided 14,000 metric tons of food since December. According to the committee, some 85% transmission line test and repair work has been undertaken in war-ravaged areas. Relentless efforts are underway to finalize the remaining workers in the coming 2 months, the committee noted.
After a lot of efforts of the pertinent bodies and workers, these results have been achieved. The rehabilitation and resumption of basic services in northern Ethiopia is progressing well, and it is encouraging.
The committee has not hidden the problems it faced while implementing its mandate to restore basic services, mentioning fuel supply constraints a major challenge.
We transported fuel from various areas of Amhara region with a barrel to undertake our activities in Aksum, Shirey and Arua. We use a generator there, and in return, the generator needs another fuel to restart. We have sent close to 15 solar refrigerators to Tigray healthcare centers and hospitals to start the vaccination. It's being installed. We will send the vaccine soon.
Customer service
It is important to reinstate Ethiopian electric utility workers in Tigray to provide customer services. We set directions to do our works.
The committee said efforts are underway to solve the problems it is facing to achieve the desired results. However, fuel supply remains a major challenge.
We have restored services based on our capacity and resources. Next, we need to mobilize our resources and emphasize to services that needs priority.
In resuming services, Ethio Telecom has done commendable work, as it was noted in the report.
Former South Africa Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo, who was also the member of a high-level panel to the AU-led peace process between the government of Ethiopia and TPLF in Pretoria, said that Africans have all the needed knowledge and expertise to solve their problems, and they can depend on each other. Member of the AU panel of the WISE, Phumzile Mlambo, along with Olusegun Obasanjo, AU High Representative for the Horn of Africa, and Uhuru Kenyatta, former President of Kenya, were the high-level panel of AU-led Ethiopian peace process that led to the Pretoria Peace Agreement between the government of Ethiopia and the TPLF. Kasahun Chane has compiled the story from the Ethiopian News Agency.
In an exclusive interview with the Ethiopian News Agency, former South African Deputy President said that Africans need to support the peace agreement in Ethiopia and encourage for its implementation. According to her, Africans should support Ethiopians to implement the agreement in full and to look for more opportunities to make a difference in Ethiopia. She pointed out that the two parties are working very hard, emphasizing there is still a lot to do.
Means that as Africans, we have the knowledge of what needs to be done in Africa. We can depend on each other, we can depend on the people of Ethiopia, we can depend on fellow Africans who want to support the Ethiopians.
The government has been intensifying efforts to provide humanitarian aid with international partners and from air's resources through all corridors on land and by air transport. The government is also mobilizing resources for the restoration of basic services, electricity, water, health, education, and rebuilding destroyed infrastructure facilities.
The World Bank disclosed that vulnerable Ethiopians will benefit from $745 million in grants for improved access to health services and flood management projects. The World Bank, in its press release issued yesterday, stated that Ethiopians have been impacted by multiple crises, including COVID-19, climate-related disasters, and conflict in recent years, disrupting the delivery of essential health services, undermining the progress in health outcomes and service delivery achieved over the past decade. According to the statement, nearly 24 million people in conflict-affected areas are without access to adequate health services. In recent years, flood events in Ethiopia have significantly increased in magnitude, frequency, and intensity. To support Ethiopia's people as they face ongoing challenges, the World Bank Group has adopted a more people-centered approach to its programs in Ethiopia, with a strong focus on meeting basic needs and providing basic services to the vulnerable.
The 70th Global Institute.
It's expected that Ethiopia is Ethiopians
Our news is always aired on Monday to Friday on 11 a.m. and 9 p.m. and also on Saturday and Sunday on 9 p.m. Make sure to follow us. In business news, Ethiopia is working to secure more FDI inflow this Ethiopian fiscal year as the investment environment has become conducive for investors. This is according to the Ethiopian Investment Commission, AIC. Following a high-level dialogue workshop held to strengthen investment partnerships between AIC and development partners, Deputy Commissioner Daniel Teresa told ANA that the role of the Commission is to support investors engaging in Ethiopia. According to him, the AIC has huge responsibility of supporting investors to engage in import substitution and areas that create jobs, among others. Improving investment environment, supporting investment activities, resolving gaps in the sector are among the main activities to be undertaken, the Deputy Commissioner said, stating that promoting Ethiopia's investment opportunities to partners is vital. The Deputy Commissioner added that the peace deal between the government of Ethiopia and the TPLF will also play a crucial role in attracting more investors to engage in Ethiopia in various sectors. The country has attracted $3 billion in foreign direct investment last Ethiopian fiscal year. The Ministry of Industry, together with the Institute of Policy Studies at the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, the Graduate Institute of Policy Studies, GRIPS, discussed on policy matters of the Ethiopia's manufacturing industry. State Minister of the Ministry of Industry, Hassan Mohammed, underscored that although Ethiopia has shown a commendable economic performance in the last 2 decades, low technology uptake, weak linkage across the industry sector, and policy misalignment are among the challenges that resulted in unsustainable development scarcity of structural transformation. Shagao Yamato has the following detail.
The Ministry of Industry, Policy Studies Institute and the Japan International Cooperation Agency jointly held a forum aimed at tackling the challenges that hinder the production of the manufacturing sector. The discussion focused on policy ambiguity and inconsistencies, as well as the pressure on the manufacturing industry to coordinate and collaborate among relevant stakeholders. Hassan Mohammed, State Minister of the Ministry of Industry, said Ethiopia has experienced fundamental challenges such as low technology uptake, weak linkage across the industry sector, policy misalignment that resulted in unsustainable development.
Ethiopia has experienced commendable economic performance during the last 2 decades. The country has also shown improved outcomes in education, infrastructure development that will pave a way for an industrialization of the economy. Despite this progress, however, it has experienced fundamental concurrent challenges: low technology uptake, low productivity within across sectors, weak linkage within the across sectors, an increasing share of the low-skilled and the low-technology service sectors, and a limited entrepreneurial capability, which can link to a policy misalignment. These challenges have resulted in unsustainable development that didn't bring about a structural transformation in Ethiopia.
Japan has shared its experience to Ethiopia in a study indicating application of consistent development policy and convergence of the existing technologies that helped Japan to become the second-rise economy in 1968.
Regarding policy inconsistency, allow me to add some words on Japanese development experience after the World War II. At the end of World War II, Japan lost about a quarter of its national wealth by war, but became the second largest economy in the world in 1968. Application of consistent development policies, conversion of the existing technology for development. Compared to that situation, Ethiopia has a comparative advantage because there are natural resources, surplus land for the agriculture and the industry, and surplus and easily trainable young labor force with reasonable price. With all these comparative advantage, Ethiopia would achieve successful economic development through involving both the domestic and foreign direct investment.
The ministry has completed the policy drafting work involving federal and regional institutions, stakeholders, academics, and development partners to address the problem in a sustainable way, the State Minister explained.
My ministry has finalized the policy drafting of the new manufacturing industry policy, which has brought together more participants from the private sector, government, both federal and regional levels, think tanks, scholars, and development partners. The final policy write-up was done in collaboration with 13 different institutions. Our ministry has done its best effort to ensure policy alignment, and now at a national level, we are doing a policy alignment work with coordination of the Ministry of Plan and Development. I believe this discussion and reflections will contribute and play a significant role to these initiatives.
Due to policy misalignment, inconsistency, low technology service sector, the performance of the manufacturing sector remains at 52% in the country, it was learned.
And finally, from across Africa, Ghana's economic story was brighter a few years ago. Before the pandemic, the West African state was a star with fast growth rates, growing oil production, and strong investor interest. But now the country is passing through the worst economic crisis in decades. Johannes Fentaun has the following story from Africa News.
Strained by the foreign price of food commodities, some Ghanaians can no longer meet a usual weekly shopping budget. Ghana's currency was half of what it was last year, with fuel prices doubling and debt payments gobbling of government revenues. Ghana is battling its worst economic crisis in decades.
I went to the market today, going to shop for the week, and then I withdrawn 300 cedis thinking I'll get everything I needed. But I couldn't get anything. I got something though, but I didn't get to how I wanted to shop. And I even got nothing for my baby because I had a very less money left for me to shop for my baby.
Ghana signed a $3 billion bailout deal with the International Monetary Fund on Tuesday in a bid to shore up public finance, but economic stability is still a way off.
IMF deal, to me, has two folds or two dimensions. One is able to bring about macroeconomic stability. And with the macroeconomic stability, businesses are better able to plan. Individuals are able to live within their means because of the fundamentals will be very anchored and strong. The negative aspect have to do with the restrictions, government inability to employ more people, government inability to spend on social interventions that are very critical to the citizens.
The packing machine at Nakop's Pack Factory in the outskirts of Ghana's capital, Accra, is running at full pace, churning out sachets of treated drinking water. But all is not well at Nakop's. Like other businesses in Ghana these days, owners like Daniel Teki are struggling.
We planned closing our factory because we're not making any profit. Rather, we were putting in money for production. But we had a second thought that if we close it and we lay off our workers, how can they also survive? So for now, we are only producing and making loss.
Many Ghanaians are breaking up for potential austerity before any stability returns, with the impact of new taxes and spending cuts.
You're watching Addis News Hour. Here's a reminder of the stories making headlines. Prime Minister Abiy's visit to the US enhances ties between Ethiopia and international organizations. And government strives to restore basic services and double humanitarian aid in northern Ethiopia. And that's all we had for now. I'm Tabitha John. Many thanks for watching. Have a good night and take care.